Hello, fantasy footballers. I'm the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart from HotRoster Today, and what a Sunday it was. 14 games are now in the books, meaning it's time to digest this week's slate of games by highlighting the biggest winners and losers from the weekend. First up, a human highlight reel, a stud, a man so many people doubted. Odell Beckham Jr. has heard it all year. The chatter that he should be benched, the criticism for his play, and about his attitude problem. Hey, but if you look past him, he'll burn you, which is what OBJ did in a big way on Sunday. Beckham erupted for 8 catches and 220 yards, and not one, but 2 touchdowns from 60 yards out. All those receiving yards on Sunday marked the 10th time in his career he's topped 140. That's the most by any player in their first 3 seasons, and we're not even halfway through the year yet. The man is simply a beast, and now firmly in the top 5 amongst fantasy receivers. So to his owners, I ask, you still want to trade this guy? From rags to fantasy riches, this is the story of Jay Ajayi. The Miami Dolphins running back wasn't even slated to start on Sunday. Instead, he was passed on the depth chart behind Arian Foster, who was making his return from a hamstring injury. But who cares what the depth chart reads? Ajayi tallied 204 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns against the Pittsburgh Steelers. All that sweet production came despite Ajayi being started in less than 5% of standard leagues. And honestly, who could have saw this one coming? I didn't. His 32 fantasy points on Sunday were more than the 31 points he had in 9 games during his rookie season last year. He seems poised to remain the starter after working in that role the last 2 weeks, so get him if he's available on your waiver wire. And in case you're worried about him, consider this. His 200-yard rushing performance with 2 touchdowns has only been done by one other Dolphins player in history, and that man was the dreadlock himself, Ricky Williams. Rounding out our week's winners is another disappointment in fantasy who might be on the cusp of turning it around. Colby Fleener arrived in New Orleans this offseason with huge expectations. Everybody expected the talented pass catcher from Stanford was going to be the next Jimmy Graham, given his size, speed, and those soft hands. And although it took him some time to figure it out, Sunday was another example of why he might be getting closer. Not only did the big man grab 6 of his 7 targets for 70 yards and a touchdown, he also ran one in at the goal line. I mean, hey, sorry Mark Ingram owners, but if Fleener can vulture more of those scores in the red zone, he could become a fantasy monster. For now though, we'll settle for the 19 fantasy points he put up against the Panthers. 2 of his 4 most productive games have now come as a member of the Saints. And who do we have to thank for that? Drew Brees. In Breezes, we trust. Let's kick off some losers from the week, shall we? I think it's safe to say there were no bigger losers than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Reports that our Big Ben Roethlisberger has a torn left meniscus and he's going to require surgery. The good news, there's hope that he might return after their bye week. But for the time being, the wide receiver position is likely going to be affected, and the man who's going to be affected the most could be Sammy Coates. Coates came into the contest with plenty of promise. He was the 2nd most added player on the waiver wire. He had caught 12 passes for 218 yards and 2 TDs over the last 2 weeks. Then he puts up a goose egg in Miami this weekend. Plus, he's dealing with a broken index finger, and now he's no longer going to have Big Ben to lean on. In his absence, this spells big problems for those Sammy Coates owners. Another solid player over the last few weeks has to be Carlos Hyde of the 49ers. He scored 4 touchdowns in 3 weeks, along with a couple of 100-yard games. Hyde was looking like a solid RB2, but wrong. With Colin Kaepernick taking over for the 49ers, things didn't really improve. In fact, they got much worse for Hyde. Cap didn't even target Hyde once, unlike Mr. Checkdown Charlie, Blaine Gabbert did. Plus, the game got so unbelievably out of control that Hyde only got 5 carries in the second half and none in the 4th quarter. It was one of Hyde's worst days since Chip Kelly took over in San Francisco, so maybe this is as bad as it's gonna get. But on a side note, how good do you feel if you have Shady McCoy? This guy really stuck it to his old boss, didn't he? But last but not least, perennial disappointments, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah, these guys got the win, but they turned in another dud performance on offense, and no player better exemplified that than Allen Robinson. A-Rob was started in 90% of standard leagues, but only managed to score 4 fantasy points for owners who trusted him. That included this guy. That 4-point total marked the lowest since week 1 of 2015. And to make matters worse, Robinson has only cracked 60 yards receiving once this season, something he did 11 times last year. Plus, he scored 14 times during the 2015 season, a pace he's likely going to fall short of this year. But if there was ever a time to turn it around, it's going to be next week when A-Rob and the Jags face off against the Oakland Raiders. So that's it, my friends. Just wait up, though. We were a 4-1 with our picks on Hot Roster, and you can do the same as well if you check out the app at HotRoster.com. Download it. It's like no other fantasy game you've ever played. And make sure you tune in weekdays at 4:30 to Hot Roster Today with me and Gary and Thorne, only on the Fantasy Sports Network. I'm Cam Stewart. See you on the virtual gridiron.